Yeah, hello again from Europe to Africa, especially from Germany to Ghana. We continue with part 2 of the African background. These invaders had no such care. It is well worth dwelling upon these facts when we recall the pretext on which later European colonization of Africa was justified, assuming the Christian responsibility of redeeming Africa from the benightedness of barbarism. The ravages of the European slave trade were forgotten. The enormities of the European conquest were ignored. Maps prepared in Europe, which had borne the names of Mali and Shanghai, were lost. Records of the African kingdoms were left to gutter dust and crumble away. The achievements of states that had manufactured in iron and gold and carried a lucrative international trade were expunged from memories. They had disappeared as a result of the continuing European penetration and spoliation, for on the heels of the Portuguese, there quickly followed Dutch, Spanish, Danish, English, French, sailors and traders. Their purposes were the same, their methods too. They set up forts and trading posts at various points along our coast, and added a living commodity to the other items of plunder. For over 300 years, the slave trade dominated Africa's history, and in fact, influences it still today through our diminished population, and is brutalizing and retarding effects upon our socio-economic order. It does not require a very perceptive mind to appreciate the disastrous consequences it has had upon African development. Whole villages were frequently left empty of inhabitants, either through capture or flight. The number of inhabitants drawn of the African continent as slaves has been variously put between 20 and 50 million. Oh God, may Jah forgive all of us. In Ghana, there exist many reminders of those days. Christiansburg Castle, which the Danish built in the 17th century, still stands. So also the forts at Cape Coast. Their guns still facing out to sea, where they once were, used to ward off attacks by other Europeans who wanted to plunder gold and ivory and to share in the rich slave trade. Yeah, the door of never returning. This is the curse at the Cape Coast. You people should overpaint it and write all on top, the door of returning. And that is then the new slogan. It was the Portuguese who, in the 15th century, discovered gold in the area between the Ancopra and Volta rivers and called the country Mina, the mine, or the Gold Coast. They were the first to build fortified fortified warehouses along our shores for where the let me get this again. The Gold Coast. They were the first to build fortified warehouses along our shores for the protection of their trade. But soon Spanish, English and Dutch ships also began to explore the Guinea coast, as they came to call it, and more forts were established. Towards the end of the 16th century, the Gold Coast was exporting about 10,000 slaves a year, and more than half the trade was in British hands. In 1808, Britain stopped trading in slaves, and in 1874, the Gold Coast colony was established. 30 years after the bond signed by our chiefs gave Britain her first real political influence in the country. You know, the crown of the queen is holding the biggest diamond who ever found on the west coast of Africa. And this was found in Ghana. This diamond is sitting in the crown of the queen. And now King Charles in England. See now? I have to drink a drop of water, please. The notorious scramble for Africa began in the last quarter of the 19th century. At that time, Great Britain, France, Germany, Spain, Portugal, Belgium, and Italy embarked on a race for colonies. In 1881, France extended her colonial way over Tunis, and in the following year Britain secured control over Egypt. In 1884, the first German colony was established at Angra Pequena on the coast of southwest Africa. The occupation of Togoland and the Cameroon in West Africa followed. A French force seized the territory between the Cameroons and the Portuguese colony of Angola, which became the French Congo. In 1894, the tricolor was hoisted over Timbuktu, Dahomey, and the Ivory Coast. The whole of the Western Sudan was soon occupied by France. In 1885, a protectorate was established over Madagascar. Then ensued the Angola-French jealousy, which culminated in a crisis in 1898 when the occupation of the Sudanese post of Fashoda threatened to upset Britain's colonial position within that area. War between France and Britain appeared to be imminent, but the French force withdrew. France then turned her attention to Morocco. There she came up against German ambitions. A conference of colonial powers was called in Algeria in 1906, with the result that French and Spanish claims to interfere in Moroccan international affairs were recognized. In 1876, the Congo International Association was formed under the direction of Leopold II of Belgium for the occupation of the Congo Basin. Among the declared objects of the association was the intention to open to civilization the only part of our globe where it had not yet penetrated. At the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 85, when the European powers divided most of Africa up between them, Leopold obtained permission to form the Belgian settlements into a Congo Free State under his personal suzerainty. Italy, coming relatively late into the scramble for colonies, occupied, among other places, Assab and Massawa on the African shore of the Red Sea, and in 1889 the colony of Italian Somaliland was formed. Thus, by the beginning of the 20th century, Africa, apart from South Africa, which developed differently, was largely divided up between the various European powers. Till today, even 50, 60 years later, see, Africans' people, mineral resources, harbors, rivers, forests, all were to be used to build up the economic and political strength of the colonial powers. Some of the territories changed hands after the First World War, when former German colonies were distributed among the victors of mandated territories under the League of Nations. This is also good for my European youth to learn a little bit deep history of Africa, because here our schools, they not teach nothing. They sweep all Africa history under the carpet. And if I meet my youth or even people in my age, sometimes they don't even know about nothing about colonialism time. Amazing, huh? Some of the territories changed hands after the First World War, when former German colonies were distributed among the victors as mandated territories under the League of Nations. Britain received German East Africa, a quarter of Togoland and a piece of the Cameroons. France took over the remaining 3/4 of Togoland and the greater part of the Cameroons, while Belgium got a silence of German East Africa. The Union of South Africa received German Southwest Africa. Just as when the colonies were originally seized, the rights of the indigenous peoples were completely disregarded. Territorial boundaries were confirmed or freshly delimited in accordance with the new share out in a quiet, arbitrary fashion. They had no relation to ethnic realities. In many cases, boundaries cut across tribes and even villages. Problems resulting from the cynical parceling out of Africa still remain and can only be settled by continental African Union. Oh God. This book is more than 50 years old. And now it's burning more than ever. It's like Africa needs a new leader like Nukrumah. The reasons which led the nations of Europe to seek colonies have been explained with differing emphasis by many historians. Most seem to agree that the colonial powers were guided primarily by economic, political, and military considerations, probably in that order. Although certain individuals may have come to Africa from purely altruistic motives, the general ideas of the European civilizing mission and the white man's burden have at least been largely abandoned even by the most rabid of imperialists. Good. That was the second part of the chapter, the African background. Tonight it is really burning in my fingers. I would like to read this Problems of Government. Problems of Government is going to be the next. So stay tuned and have a nice time and go for peace. One world, one love. Bye-bye.